The nurse condemned unjustly. She saved the son of the woman who destroyed her. The hospital corridor is white, sterile, suffocating. Emergency lights flicker overhead. A woman rushes through the automatic doors, her designer heels clicking desperately against the linoleum floor. Her face is pale, her hands trembling. Behind her, nurses move quickly, pushing a gurney carrying a small boy. Unconscious, fragile, dying. "Please," the woman gasps, grabbing the arm of a passing doctor. "Please, you have to save him. He's all I have left." The doctor looks away. "We've done everything we can. There's nothing more. There has to be someone." Her voice cracks, raw with terror. "Anyone." A nurse hesitates, then whispers a name. The woman's blood runs cold. Minutes later, the operating room door opens. A figure steps through, surgical mask in place, eyes hidden beneath the harsh lights. The woman freezes. She knows those eyes. She destroyed them once. The surgeon removes her mask slowly, deliberately. Emily Carter. The nurse she called a murderer. The woman whose life she burned to ashes. Emily's voice is soft, cold as winter frost. "Are you sure you trust killers, Mrs. Hale?" The screen cuts to black. 3 years earlier. Emily Carter moved through the hospital ward like a prayer in motion. Her scrubs were faded from 1,000 washes, her shoes worn smooth, but her smile never dimmed. She believed in healing. Not just bodies, but souls. Every patient mattered. Every family deserved hope. "You're going to be fine, Mr. Harrison," she said softly, adjusting the IV drip for an elderly man who'd been crying. "I promise you're not alone here." The man squeezed her hand. "You're an angel," she laughed gently. "Just a nurse who cares." Down the hall, a new patient had arrived. Richard Hale, millionaire, real estate mogul, cardiac complications. He was pale, weak, but conscious. His daughter, Victoria Hale, stood beside his bed like a marble statue. Beautiful, immaculate, cold. Her eyes swept over Emily with the briefest flicker of disdain. "Is this the best nurse they have?" Victoria asked sharply. Emily smiled through the sting. "I'll take excellent care of your father, ma'am." Richard looked at his daughter, then at Emily. He reached out, squeezing Emily's hand. "I believe you," he whispered. Victoria turned away, jaw tight. She hated not being in control. The night shift was quiet. Emily checked on Richard Hale every 30 minutes, monitoring his vitals, adjusting medications, speaking to him softly even when he slept. He had improved steadily over the past week. The doctors were pleased. Recovery was possible. At 2:47 a.m., the monitors began to scream. Emily bolted into the room. Richard was convulsing, his body arching violently against the restraints. Foam bubbled at his lips. His eyes rolled back. "Code Blue, room 304, Emily shouted, slamming the emergency button. She grabbed the crash cart, starting compressions immediately. Her hands moved with precision, years of training taking over. "Come on, Mr. Hale, stay with me. Stay with me." The team arrived within seconds. Dr. Patel took over, barking orders. Emily stepped back, her hands shaking, her scrubs soaked with sweat. She watched helplessly as they tried everything. Defibrillation, epinephrine, intubation. Nothing worked. At 3:12 a.m., Dr. Patel called it. Time of death, 3:12. The room fell silent. Emily stood frozen, staring at Richard's lifeless face. She had been with him minutes before. He was stable. This didn't make sense. The door exploded open. Victoria Hale stood in the doorway, her face twisted with shock and rage. Her eyes locked onto Emily. "What did you do?" Victoria's voice was a deadly whisper. "Mrs. Hale, I'm so sorry," Emily began, stepping forward. "Don't touch me," Victoria screamed, her voice shattering the silence. "Don't you dare come near me. You killed him. Ma'am, please, your father had a sudden cardiac event. He was fine. He was getting better." Victoria's hands were shaking, her perfectly composed mask crumbling. "And now he's dead. You were the only one here. What did you do to him?" Dr. Patel intervened. "Mrs. Hale, I understand you're in shock, but Nurse Carter followed protocol. I want her arrested." Victoria's voice turned to ice. "I want her investigated. I want to know what she gave him." Emily's blood turned cold. "I didn't." "Security!" Victoria screamed. "Get her out of here!" Within minutes, hospital security escorted Emily from the room. Her colleagues stared. Whispers spread like wildfire. By morning, the story had leaked to the press. Nurse under investigation in millionaire's mysterious death. Emily sat alone in the break room, her head in her hands, unable to process what was happening. She had done everything right. She had followed every protocol. She had cared for Richard Hale like he was her own family. And now, she was a suspect. Her phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor. "Don't come in tomorrow pending investigation." Another buzz. A news alert. "Family demands justice in hospital death." Another. A photo of her face, blurred but recognizable, with the headline, "Killer Nurse." Emily turned off her phone. She sat in the darkness, trembling, her entire world collapsing around her. Outside the window, the sun began to rise, indifferent to her suffering. She whispered into the empty room, "I didn't do anything wrong." But no one was listening. The courtroom was a theater of cruelty. Emily sat at the defense table, hands folded tightly in her lap, dressed in a borrowed suit that didn't fit. Her public defender, a young man named Marcus Chen, looked exhausted before the trial even began. Across the aisle, Victoria Hale sat with her team of attorneys, sharp, expensive, merciless. The prosecution opened with a performance. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the lead prosecutor began, his voice dripping with righteous fury. "This is a case about trust. Richard Hale trusted the hospital. He trusted the medical system, and most tragically, he trusted Emily Carter." He turned, pointing directly at her. Emily felt 100 eyes pierce her skin. Emily Carter was the last person to see Richard Hale alive. She was alone with him when he died, and the evidence will show that she administered a lethal dose of potassium chloride, a drug that, when injected improperly, causes immediate cardiac arrest. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Emily's hands trembled. She wanted to scream, "I didn't do it," but her lawyer had told her to stay silent, stay calm, let him handle it. The prosecution presented their case with surgical precision. They brought in medical experts who testified that the cause of death was consistent with potassium chloride overdose. They showed the jury Emily's logged medication records that had been altered, though Emily didn't know that yet. They called a pharmacist who testified that Emily had requested potassium chloride that night. She had, for another patient, as prescribed, but in the courtroom, it sounded damning. They brought in a colleague who reluctantly admitted, under pressure, that Emily had seemed distracted that week, exhausted, overworked. "Negligence," the prosecutor said, hammering the word home. "At best, negligence. At worst, something far darker." Victoria Hale took the stand. She was flawless, poised, tearful, believable. She spoke of her father's hope, his trust in Emily, his final moments. "He told me she was kind," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "He said she made him feel safe, and I believed him. I trusted her with his life." She looked directly at Emily, her eyes cold behind the veil of tears. "I will never forgive myself for that," Emily's lawyer tried. Marcus Chen cross-examined the experts, pointed out inconsistencies, argued that the evidence was circumstantial, but he was outmatched, outfunded, and out of time. The jury had already made up their minds. The defense's witnesses were weak. A few nurses testified to Emily's character, but they seemed nervous, unconvincing. Emily herself chose not to testify. Marcus advised against it, fearing the prosecution would tear her apart. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, Emily could barely breathe. "On the charge of criminally negligent homicide, how do you find the defendant?" The forewoman stood. "Guilty." The word echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Emily's knees buckled. Marcus grabbed her arm, holding her upright. Behind her, someone cheered. Victoria Hale sat perfectly still, her face expressionless. The judge spoke, but Emily couldn't hear the words. Something about sentencing, something about justice, something about consequences. She was sentenced to 5 years. As they led her away in handcuffs, Emily turned one last time to look at the courtroom. Victoria was watching her, her eyes unreadable. Emily wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to tell them all that she was innocent, that she had dedicated her life to saving people, that she would never, ever harm a patient. But the door closed behind her, and the world moved on. Prison was a tomb for the living. Emily learned quickly to keep her head down, to speak only when necessary, to trust no one. The other inmates knew why she was there. "Killer nurse," they whispered. Some were afraid of her, others wanted to test her. She survived by retreating inward. She worked in the prison infirmary, the only place she felt even remotely human. She bandaged wounds, distributed medications, comforted the sick. The prison doctor, an older woman named Dr. Lillian Brooks, saw something in Emily that the world had missed. "You didn't do it, did you?" Dr. Brooks asked one day, watching Emily gently clean an infected wound on an inmate's arm. Emily paused, then continued working. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Emily didn't respond. Hope was too dangerous. She was released after 3 years for good behavior. The day she walked out, there were no cameras, no family, no friends, just a bus ticket and $200 in gate money. She moved to a small, forgotten town where no one knew her name. She rented a tiny apartment above a laundromat, the kind of place where the walls were thin and the heat barely worked. She took a job at a free clinic, seeing patients who couldn't afford real doctors. The clinic's director, an elderly physician named Dr. Samuel Porter, didn't ask about her past. He saw how she worked, careful, compassionate, tireless, and that was enough. "You're overqualified for this," he said one day. Emily smiled faintly. "I'm exactly where I need to be." She lived quietly, invisibly. She walked to work before dawn, treated patients all day, and returned home to an empty apartment. She had no television, no phone, no internet. She read medical journals and old novels. She cooked simple meals. She slept poorly, haunted by the trial, by Richard Hale's face, by Victoria's cold eyes. She still wore the necklace Richard had given her days before he died, a small silver pendant with a medical caduceus. He had pressed it into her hand one evening, smiling weakly. "For the angel who saved me," he had said. She hadn't saved him, but she kept the necklace anyway, a reminder of what she had lost. Years passed. The world forgot Emily Carter. She became a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered in hospital break rooms. But she kept working, kept healing, kept believing, even when belief felt like foolishness, that medicine was still sacred. One night, sitting by her window and watching rain streak the glass, she whispered into the darkness, "I forgive you." She wasn't sure if she meant it, but she needed to say it anyway. Victoria Hale had everything. After her father's death, she inherited his empire. Real estate holdings, investments, properties scattered across the country. She was rich, powerful, untouchable. The trial had been a spectacle, a victory. Justice, she told herself, had been served. But empires built on lies are fragile. Within a year, cracks began to show. Business partners distanced themselves. Deals fell through. Whispers of corruption and fraud followed her father's name, and by extension hers. Investigations were launched. Assets were frozen. The press, which had once championed her, now circled like vultures. Victoria fought back with lawyers, with money, with sheer will, but she was drowning and she knew it. Through it all, she had one anchor, her son, Oliver. Oliver was 7 when his grandfather died. He was bright, sensitive, curious, everything Victoria wasn't. He asked questions she couldn't answer. "Why do people say bad things about Grandpa? Why are you always sad, Mom?" She held him close and lied. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Everything's fine." But nothing was fine. Oliver began having headaches, small at first. Victoria dismissed them as stress. Children absorbed their parents' anxieties, she reasoned, but the headaches worsened. Then came the fainting spells. The first time it happened, they were at home. Oliver collapsed in the kitchen, his small body crumpling like paper. Victoria screamed, called 911, rode with him in the ambulance, her heart shattering with every passing second. The diagnosis came a week later. "It's a rare neurological condition," the doctor explained, his voice gentle but grim. "A vascular malformation in the brain. It's inoperable with conventional methods. The risk of hemorrhage is extremely high." Victoria's world stopped. "What can we do?" "We can manage symptoms, make him comfortable, but..." "No." Victoria's voice was steel. "There has to be something. Surgery, experimental treatment, anything." The doctor hesitated. "We've consulted with every specialist in the region. The consensus is the same." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hale." Victoria refused to accept it. She flew Oliver to the best hospitals, saw the most renowned surgeons, spent fortunes on consultations. Every answer was the same. Too dangerous, too complex, too risky. Months passed. Oliver grew weaker. The headaches became unbearable. He stopped playing, stopped smiling. He spent his days in bed, staring at the ceiling, asking his mother when the pain would stop. Victoria sat beside him every night, holding his hand, whispering promises she couldn't keep. "You're going to be okay, baby. Mommy's going to fix this." But she couldn't fix it. For the first time in her life, money and power meant nothing. One evening, as Oliver slept fitfully, Victoria met with Dr. Raymond Keller, an old family friend and one of the few doctors still willing to speak honestly with her. "There's no one?" she asked, her voice hollow. Dr. Keller sighed. "There's one person." "But who?" "A woman. Former nurse, actually. She's been working miracles at a free clinic upstate. Patients who were written off, conditions considered hopeless, she's saved them. I don't know how she does it. Some say it's intuition. Others say it's something closer to art." Victoria leaned forward. "What's her name?" Dr. Keller hesitated, his expression darkening. "Victoria, I don't think—" "What is her name?" He looked at her for a long moment, then spoke softly. "Emily Carter." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. The room tilted. She gripped the edge of the table. "No," she whispered. "Anyone but her. She's the only one who might be able to help your son." Victoria sat in silence, her mind screaming. Emily Carter, the woman she had destroyed, the woman she had called a murderer, the woman whose life she had burned to the ground. Dr. Keller stood. "I'll understand if you can't—" "Where is she?" He blinked. "What?" Victoria's eyes were hollow, desperate. "Where is she?" The clinic was nothing like the hospitals Victoria knew. It was small, cramped, dimly lit. The waiting room was filled with people who looked like they had nowhere else to go. Elderly, poor, forgotten. A woman coughed into her elbow. A child whimpered on his mother's lap. Victoria felt like she was stepping into another world. The receptionist, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, looked up. "Can I help you?" Victoria's throat tightened. "I need to see Dr. Carter." "Dr. Carter doesn't take appointments, walk-ins only. You'll have to wait." Victoria wanted to argue, to demand, to use her name and her money to skip the line. But she looked at the people around her, people who had been waiting far longer, people who needed help just as desperately, and she sat down. She waited 2 hours. Finally, the receptionist called her name. "Mrs. Hale, Dr. Carter will see you now." Victoria stood, her legs unsteady. She followed the receptionist down a narrow hallway, past exam rooms with peeling paint and outdated equipment. They stopped at the last door. "She's inside," the receptionist said softly. Victoria hesitated, her hand on the doorknob. She hadn't seen Emily Carter in 3 years. The last time Emily had been in handcuffs being led from the courtroom. Victoria had watched her go, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. Now she felt only terror. She opened the door. Emily stood with her back to the door, washing her hands at a small sink. She wore simple scrubs, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. She looked thinner, older, tired. "I'll be with you in a moment," Emily said without turning. Victoria couldn't speak. Her throat had closed. Emily dried her hands and turned. Their eyes met. The room froze. Emily's expression didn't change. She didn't gasp, didn't flinch, didn't react at all. She simply looked at Victoria, her gaze calm and unreadable. Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Emily spoke first, her voice quiet. "Mrs. Hale, it's been a long time." Victoria's composure shattered. Tears filled her eyes. I need your help." Emily's face remained neutral. "What happened?" "My son." Victoria's voice broke. "He's dying. The doctors say there's nothing they can do. They said you might be able to help him." Emily was silent for a long moment. Then she said simply, "Why would I help you?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Victoria's knees buckled. She sank into the chair beside her, her hands covering her face. "I know what I did to you. I know I destroyed your life. I know you have every right to turn me away." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "But my son is innocent. He's 10 years old. He's in pain every single day and I can't fix it. Please, I'm begging you, save him." Emily stared at her. The woman who had called her a murderer, the woman who had torn her life apart, the woman who had shown no mercy. "You called me a killer," Emily said softly. "You stood in that courtroom and told the world I murdered your father. You watched them put me in handcuffs. You smiled." Victoria flinched as if struck. I know, and I will carry that for the rest of my life, but please, do you still think I killed him?" Victoria froze. "What? Do you still think I'm a murderer?" The question was a test. Victoria understood that. She also understood that her answer mattered more than anything she had ever said. She met Emily's eyes. "No," she whispered. "I don't." Emily's expression shifted just slightly. "Why not?" "Because a murderer wouldn't be here," Victoria said, her voice trembling. "A murderer wouldn't have spent 3 years in prison and still come back to medicine. A murderer wouldn't care about people the way you do." She took a shaky breath. I was wrong, I was angry and grieving, and I blamed you because I needed someone to blame, and I destroyed you for it. Silence. Then Emily spoke, her voice barely audible. Bring him tomorrow. 9 a.m. I'll see what I can do. Victoria's breath caught. You'll help him. Emily looked at her with an expression Victoria couldn't read. Pain, compassion, something ancient and weary. I'll help him, Emily said. Not for you, for him. Victoria stood, her legs shaking. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. Emily's voice was flat. I can't make promises. I can only try. Victoria nodded, wiping her eyes. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Emily, I'm sorry. I know it doesn't mean anything, but you're right, Emily said quietly. It doesn't. Victoria left without another word. Emily stood alone in the exam room, her hands gripping the edge of the sink. She stared at her reflection in the small mirror. Older, harder, scarred. God help me, she whispered. Oliver Hale was small for his age, with dark curls and eyes that looked too old for a 10-year-old. When Emily first saw him, he was sitting in a wheelchair, his head lolling to one side, his mother's hand gripping his. Emily knelt in front of him, meeting his eyes. Hi, Oliver. I'm Dr. Carter. The boy blinked slowly. Are you going to hurt me? Emily's chest tightened. No, sweetheart. I'm going to try to help you feel better. Oliver studied her face. Mom says you're really smart. Emily glanced at Victoria, who stood rigidly by the door, her face pale. Your mom is very kind. Over the next week, Emily ran every test, reviewed every scan, consulted with specialists remotely. Oliver's condition was worse than she'd expected. The malformation in his brain was growing, pressing against critical areas. A rupture was inevitable. When it happened, he would die within minutes. Surgery was the only option, but it would require a level of precision that bordered on the impossible. Emily worked late into the night, mapping out the procedure, running simulations, preparing for every possible complication. Dr. Porter found her asleep at her desk one morning, surrounded by medical journals and scribbled notes. You're going to kill yourself, he said gently. Emily looked up, exhausted. I can't let him die. Even though his mother destroyed you. Emily was silent for a long moment. He's not his mother. During the day, Emily spent time with Oliver. She talked to him, made him laugh, brought him books and puzzles. He was bright, curious, gentle, everything a child should be. One afternoon, as she checked his vitals, Oliver asked, Dr. Carter, were you in trouble once? Emily froze. Why do you ask that? I heard Mom talking to someone on the phone. She said she hurt you really bad. Emily sat down beside him. Your mom and I had a difficult time, yes. Are you still mad at her? Emily considered the question. I was, for a long time. But not anymore? Emily looked at him, this fragile, innocent boy who had done nothing wrong, and felt something shift inside her. No, she said softly, not anymore. Oliver smiled. Good. Mom's sad a lot. I don't like it when she's sad. Emily squeezed his hand. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you're okay, I promise. I believe you, Oliver said. Those 3 words broke something in Emily that had been frozen for years. Victoria watched from the doorway, tears streaming silently down her face. That evening, after Oliver had fallen asleep, Victoria approached Emily. Can I ask you something? Victoria's voice was hesitant. Emily didn't look up from her notes. What? Why are you helping him? Really? Emily set down her pen and finally met Victoria's eyes. Because I'm a doctor. That's what I do. Even after everything I did. Especially after everything you did. Emily's voice was firm. Because if I let anger turn me into someone who could walk away from a dying child, then you would have destroyed more than just my career. You would have destroyed who I am. Victoria's face crumbled. I don't deserve your kindness. No, Emily agreed. You don't. But your son deserves a chance to live, and that's all that matters. Victoria sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. I wish I could take it back. All of it, I wish. Wishes don't change the past, Emily said quietly. Only actions change the future. Victoria looked up, her eyes red. Is there anything I can do to make this right? Emily considered the question. Then she said simply, tell me the truth. Victoria's blood ran cold. What? The night your father died. Tell me what really happened. Victoria's face drained of color. I don't know what you... Don't lie to me. Emily's voice was steel. Not now, not after everything. Victoria stood abruptly, pacing the small room. Her hands were shaking. Why are you asking me this? Because I've been reviewing your father's medical records. I requested them as part of Oliver's file. Genetic predispositions, family history. And I found something. Emily pulled out a folder, spreading documents across the desk. Your father's potassium levels were critically high the night he died. The prosecution used that as evidence against me. But what they didn't mention, or didn't know, was that those levels were consistent with a massive, sudden influx, not gradual accumulation. She pointed to a lab report. This shows he received a dose of potassium supplement earlier that day. It wasn't prescribed by his cardiologist, it wasn't ordered by any doctor in the hospital. Victoria's face was ashen. Emily, who ordered it? Victoria. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Victoria sank back into the chair, her hands covering her face. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I did. Emily's world tilted. Even though she'd suspected, even though the evidence pointed to it, hearing the words aloud was devastating. Why? Emily's voice was hoarse. Victoria was crying now, her shoulders shaking. He was dying anyway. The doctors said he had months at best. But his will, his empire, it was all in limbo. Business partners were circling, vultures waiting for him to die so they could tear everything apart. She looked up, her face streaked with tears. I thought if I could speed it up just a little, I could secure everything before they destroyed it. I didn't think of it as murder. I thought of it as mercy. You thought you were helping him. Emily's voice was cold. I thought I was protecting his legacy. Victoria's voice broke. But when he died, when I saw him lying there, I panicked. I couldn't admit what I'd done. I couldn't face it. And you were there. You were the perfect scapegoat. Emily stood frozen, her mind reeling. 3 years of her life, her career, her freedom, her identity, all stolen because Victoria Hale couldn't face her own guilt. You let me go to prison, Emily said, her voice shaking. You stood in that courtroom and called me a murderer. You watched them put me in handcuffs, and you knew the truth the entire time. Victoria was sobbing now, her body curled in on itself. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I was a coward. I was selfish. I destroyed you to save myself. Emily felt rage boiling inside her, hot, volcanic, all-consuming. She wanted to scream. She wanted to destroy Victoria, the way Victoria had destroyed her. She wanted justice. But then she thought of Oliver, small, innocent Oliver, lying in a hospital bed, trusting her to save him. Does anyone else know? Emily asked, her voice flat. Victoria shook her head. No, just you. Emily picked up the folder, holding Victoria's confession, documented, undeniable, in her hands. She could go to the police. She could clear her name. She could watch Victoria be arrested, tried, convicted. She could finally have justice. Instead, she walked to the shredder. Victoria's head snapped up. What are you doing? Emily fed the documents into the machine, one by one. The shredder hummed, consuming the evidence. Emily, stop! Those could exonerate you. Emily turned, her eyes hard. Your son is dying. If I destroy you now, if I send you to prison, who takes care of him? Who holds his hand during surgery? Who's there when he wakes up? Victoria stared at her, speechless. I could have justice, Emily said quietly. Or I could save your son. I can't do both. But I deserve a lot of things I'll never get. Emily's voice was weary. But that child deserves a mother, even if she's a terrible one. Victoria crumbled, falling to her knees. Why? Why would you do this? Emily looked down at her, this broken, guilty, desperate woman, and felt something strange. Not forgiveness, not quite, but something softer than rage. Because I'm not you, Emily said simply, and I never will be. She walked to the door, then paused. Oliver's surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Be there. Victoria remained on the floor, her hands pressed against her face, her body racked with sobs. Emily closed the door behind her and stood in the hallway alone. Her hands were trembling. Her chest felt like it was being crushed. She had chosen mercy over justice, compassion over vengeance. She wasn't sure if that made her strong or foolish, but it was done. The surgery began at dawn. Emily stood in the operating room, her hands steady despite the storm raging inside her. Oliver lay on the table, small and fragile, his head shaved and marked with surgical lines. The team around her was silent, focused, trusting her completely. She had spent the entire night preparing. Every instrument was in place, every contingency planned, every prayer whispered. This was the most dangerous surgery of her career. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and Oliver would die on the table. Emily took a breath, picked up the scalpel, and began. Hours passed. The surgery was a delicate dance. Millimeters mattered, seconds counted. Emily worked with absolute precision. her years of experience and intuition guiding every movement. She navigated around critical blood vessels, carefully excised the malformation, reinforced weakened areas with synthetic grafts. There were moments when the monitors screamed warnings, moments when the team held their breath, moments when Emily felt time itself slow down, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. At 2:47 p.m., 12 hours after the first incision, Emily placed the final suture. The monitors beeped steadily. Oliver's vitals were stable. "We're done," she said quietly. The room exhaled. The surgical team looked at each other in disbelief. They had just witnessed something extraordinary. Emily stepped back, her legs shaking, her hands finally beginning to tremble. Dr. Porter, who had been observing, placed a hand on her shoulder. "That was remarkable," he said softly. Emily didn't respond. She simply stared at Oliver's small face, peaceful under anesthesia, and whispered, "Live." Victoria was waiting in the hallway. When Emily emerged from the operating room, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were hollow, her makeup smeared, her hands gripping each other so tightly her knuckles were white. When she saw Emily, she stood abruptly. He's alive," Emily said. "The surgery was successful. He'll need time to recover, but the prognosis is good." Victoria's legs gave out. She collapsed against the wall, her hands covering her mouth, sobs tearing through her body. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Emily watched her for a moment, then said quietly, "You can see him in an hour. He'll be in recovery." She turned to walk away. "Emily, wait." Victoria's voice was desperate. Emily stopped, but didn't turn around. "I don't know how to live with what I've done," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to be the person my son deserves. I don't know how to make this right." Emily turned slowly. Her face was exhausted, lined with a weariness that went deeper than physical fatigue. "You start by telling the truth," Emily said. Victoria's eyes widened. "But you destroyed the evidence." "I destroyed the documents, but you still have a choice." Emily's voice was firm. "You can keep living the lie, or you can confess. Not to me, to yourself. To your son, when he's old enough to understand. To whoever you answer to when you close your eyes at night." Victoria stared at her, tears streaming down her face. "The justice system failed me," Emily continued. "But there's another kind of justice, the kind that happens in here." She touched her chest. "That's between you and whatever you believe in. I can't force it. I can only tell you, carrying that truth will destroy you slowly. I know, because carrying false guilt almost destroyed me." Victoria sank to the floor, her back against the wall. "I don't deserve your mercy." "No," Emily agreed, "you don't. But your son deserves a mother who can look him in the eye, so you decide who you're going to be." Emily walked away, leaving Victoria alone in the hallway. The days that followed were a blur. Oliver recovered remarkably well. Within a week, he was sitting up, eating, joking with the nurses. The headaches were gone. The weakness was fading. He was going to live. Emily visited him every day, checking his progress, adjusting his medications, making sure his recovery stayed on track. Oliver always smiled when she entered the room, his face lighting up. "Dr. Carter, guess what? I took 10 steps today." "That's wonderful, Oliver. Mom says when I'm all better, we're going to the ocean." "I've never seen the ocean." Emily smiled. "You'll love it." Victoria was always there, sitting beside Oliver's bed, holding his hand, reading to him, being present in a way she had never been before. She looked different, smaller somehow, humbled. When Emily entered the room, Victoria's eyes would fill with gratitude and shame in equal measure. They didn't speak much. There was nothing left to say. One afternoon, as Emily was reviewing Oliver's discharge papers, Victoria approached her in the hallway. "He's going home tomorrow," Victoria said softly. "Yes, he's ready." Victoria hesitated, then said, "I contacted the district attorney's office this morning." Emily's pen stopped moving. She looked up slowly. "I told them I needed to make a statement," Victoria continued, her voice shaking. "About my father's death. About what really happened." Emily's heart began to pound. "Victoria, I can't live with it anymore," Victoria said, tears filling her eyes. "You were right. It's destroying me. Every time I look at Oliver, every time he smiles at me, I think about what I did to you. I think about the lie I've been living." She took a shaky breath. "I'm going to confess. I'm going to tell them everything. I don't know what will happen to me. I don't know if they'll reopen the case or if there's a statute of limitations or what, but I have to try." Emily stood frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. "I need you to know," Victoria said, her voice breaking. that I'm not doing this to absolve myself. I'm doing it because it's the only way I can look at my son and not hate myself. I'm doing it because you saved his life, and I owe you more than I can ever repay." She wiped her eyes. "I know it won't bring back the years I took from you. I know it won't undo the damage. But maybe it's a start." Emily felt something crack inside her chest, something hard and frozen that had been there for years. Tears filled her eyes. "What about Oliver?" she asked quietly. "If you're arrested, my sister will take care of him. She's a good person, better than me." Victoria's voice was steady now, resolved. "He'll be safe. He'll be loved. And maybe, someday, when he's older, I'll be able to tell him the truth about who his mother really was and who she tried to become." Emily didn't know what to say. She had spent 3 years imagining this moment, the moment when Victoria would finally face consequences, when the truth would finally come to light. But now that it was happening, she felt no triumph, only a deep, aching sadness. "Victoria," she said softly, "I don't know if I can forgive you." Victoria nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, and I don't expect you to. But I hope, someday, you can forgive yourself for being the person who saved my son anyway." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. She realized in that moment that she had been carrying her own guilt. Guilt for not saving Richard Hale, guilt for failing, guilt for being powerless. And Victoria's confession, strange as it was, had finally released her from that burden. "Thank you," Emily whispered. Victoria looked surprised. "For what?" "For giving me back the truth." They stood in silence for a long moment, two women bound together by tragedy, betrayal, and an impossible act of mercy. Then Victoria turned and walked away, her shoulders squared, ready to face whatever came next. Emily watched her go, then returned to her office. She sat at her desk, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of the last 3 years finally beginning to lift. Her phone rang. It was Dr. Porter. "Emily, you need to see the news." She turned on the small television in her office. A breaking news banner scrolled across the screen. "Victoria Hale confesses to father's death. Nurse Emily Carter was innocent." Emily's hands began to shake. The news anchor was speaking, but she couldn't hear the words. She could only see the images, footage from the original trial, photos of her being led away in handcuffs, shots of Victoria entering the district attorney's office that morning. The truth was finally out. Within hours, Emily's phone was flooded with calls, from lawyers, from reporters, from former colleagues, from the hospital that had fired her. Apologies poured in, offers of reinstatement, promises of compensation. Emily turned off her phone. She sat in the quiet of her office alone and finally allowed herself to cry, not tears of anger or grief, but tears of release. She had survived. She had endured. And somehow, impossibly, she had emerged on the other side, still capable of compassion. 6 months later, Emily stood in the garden of the clinic, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. The air was cool, clean, filled with the scent of blooming flowers. She held a cup of coffee in her hands, savoring the warmth. Behind her, the clinic was already bustling with activity. Dr. Porter had retired, naming Emily as his successor. She had declined several offers to return to prestigious hospitals. She belonged here, with the people who needed her most. Footsteps approached. Emily turned to see a small figure running toward her, dark curls bouncing. "Dr. Carter! Dr. Carter!" Oliver crashed into her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Emily laughed, setting down her coffee to hug him back. "Oliver, what are you doing here?" "Aunt Sarah brought me. I wanted to see you." Emily looked up to see Victoria's sister, a kind woman with gentle eyes, waving from the parking lot. Emily waved back. Oliver pulled away, his face glowing with health and happiness. "Look, no more headaches. I can run and play and everything." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Aunt Sarah says Mom's coming home soon, maybe next month." Emily nodded. Victoria had been sentenced to 3 years for criminally negligent homicide, a reduced sentence given her confession and cooperation. Emily had attended the sentencing, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. When Victoria had been led away, she had looked back one final time, mouthing 2 words, "Thank you." "Are you going to visit her?" Oliver asked. Emily considered the question. "Maybe someday. She talks about you a lot. In her letters, she says you're the bravest person she's ever met." Emily's throat tightened. "Your mom is brave too. It takes courage to tell the truth." Oliver looked up at her with those impossibly old eyes. "Do you forgive her?" Emily knelt down, meeting his gaze. "I'm working on it. Forgiveness takes time." That's what Aunt Sarah says too. Oliver smiled. But I think you're already pretty good at it. He hugged her one more time, then ran back to his aunt's car, waving enthusiastically. Emily waved back, watching as the car disappeared down the road. She stood alone in the garden, the sun warming her face, and felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Her name had been cleared, her reputation restored. But none of that mattered as much as the simple truth she had rediscovered. She was a healer. That was who she had always been, who she would always be. No trial, no prison, no betrayal could take that from her. She picked up her coffee, took a sip, and smiled. A new patient was waiting inside, someone who needed help, someone who needed hope. Emily turned and walked back toward the clinic, ready to do what she did best: save lives.